welcome everybody to another edition of Hot Program. I am your host with the most, all the way from the East Coast, and as always, good people, I am in. What the hell's wrong with this thing?
Some kind of mode.
Airplane mode, and now a man who you are probably already familiar with, a man who put little thought into this introduction because he needs no introduction. How you doing today, my one black friend?
I'm exhausted. How are you doing talking about that?
Yeah, same, definitely, definitely
Yeah,
exhausted.
After this, I got about 7 hours worth of work to do.
Same, yeah.
You do?
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah.
For my job, where everyone else is off this week.
I work all day, every day.
Yeah.
So, all right, let's jump into this clip because we're gonna talk about, we talk a lot about whitewashing Christianity, and today we're gonna talk about blackwashing Christianity and what that looks like. And I can tell you, blackwashing is a lot more difficult for people to deal with because I think we all have these romantic notions in our heads. So let's watch as much of this as possible because the video is like I don't know, what is it? It's like 17 minutes long. So yeah, we'll just try to get through it in chunks and then and chat. All right. So
can I just make
a
couple of quick statements? This is one of my favorite topics ever. Like ever. If we're gonna go into where the Hebrews of the Bible, black people.
No, there's nothing to do with that.
No,
it's a total different thing. Hopefully this is not your favorite topic ever.
Okay, because that is like one of my favorite topics ever.
No, the Hebrews were not black.
I don't freaking know. I wasn't there. There. So
no, this is something totally different. All right, let's go ahead. You'll hear what this is about.
All right. Although Jerusalem is much closer to Africa than it is Ukraine, Germany, and a whole lot of other places in Europe.
Yes, it's true.
Anyway.
All right, let's go ahead and jump into this.
Watch this video, then we'll talk.
Hey y'all, so now that I have uploaded the first part of episode 12 of Rooted in Rome, where I'm talking about the birth of the Black church, I have something I've been wanting to share with y'all for a minute, but I needed y'all to see this foundation first, okay? So, back in November, a friend of mine invited me to her family's church. It was a primitive Baptist church. And it's a type of church I had never been to before. Her family owns it, meaning her great-grandfather started this church, which I think is beautiful for Black history, right? It's in a rural area, very small town in North Carolina. I get there and I see it's a beautiful piece of land because they have their church building and then they have a detached kitchen and space to sit and eat. And then they have a cemetery. So this is like where the entire family comes together. As I come in and I sit down, I realize there are no instruments, and I believe that particular denomination doesn't believe in instruments. And so they started worshiping. What I heard was something I had never heard before, but it felt like my soul was remembering it, if that makes sense. It felt like this is what my ancestors sang when they were enslaved. Like I could just feel something generationally, ancestrally within me. Okay? So I'm going to play a clip of the audio that I got from this, and then I'll come back and share more.
Without thy sweet mercy, I could not live here. So and thy sweet mercy. to other despair,
So there was something about the way that they were moaning and like drawing out the words in these songs.
Oh, you
And I
heard
was just
words?
like,
That
this
makes
is
one of us.
fascinating to me.
Can
Also,
you
I
pause it,
noticed that there was a lot of songs
please?
about death. It was
Documentary filmmakers who make films about the Black experience in America might love to hear that clip. Uh, it's what I would imagine a lot of those fields sounded like as you rode by them on your horse, where the people couldn't necessarily see each other because they're working, but somebody is a song leader of the group, just to pass the time, or in an Underground Railroad sense, help people figure out where they're supposed to be going so they can stay hidden during the day, or where they're supposed to meet somebody at night so that they can freaking bust out of slavery. Um, it is very interesting, and I have relatives that are from the South, and a lot of relatives that have been in ministry or are in ministry, and I've heard singing like that. I've been in churches where there's been singing like that, and it is interesting. And as you pointed out, you don't always know what they're saying. Sometimes you're literally getting a modern version, and I don't mean changed much, probably, from what was being sung 150 years ago, and maybe even before that. There are people in the South who know African songs. They have no idea what they're singing, no idea, but it was just the song, some funerary song, or something else of that nature to celebrate the tribe that was carried here with some people who were enslaved, and they didn't leave behind all of their culture. In fact, probably music and stories were the only thing they could bring with them, other than their sorrow. So, yeah,
All
interesting.
right, I'm gonna roll back a bit just so y'all can hear where she's talking about death, because it's really important.
also, I noticed that there was a lot of songs about death. It was just this focus on when I die, 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 die. And I'm just like, why so much focus on death? And then in doing the research, I'm realizing that's the theology that they were given, is that when you die, like, that's what you're looking forward to. You're not looking forward to earth right now because you're enslaved. Your life sucks. But when you die, and so let me play a clip now. In this clip, pay attention to the lead singer, because I'm going to come back and talk about him.
I'm gonna serve God until I die. Come on, church, let's go around the wall. I don't wanna stumble and I don't wanna fall. I'm gonna serve God until I die. Until I die. Church, until I die. I'm gonna serve God till I die.
Okay, so in my time and going to different Black churches here in North Carolina, I'm noticing that there's generations of us missing, like people in their 20s, 30s, 40s. Like, we're really not in these particular institutions, just from what I've seen. Okay, just not a large number of us are not there. And in this church, when I went in there, I noticed it was pretty much like 50 plus. Okay. So this particular man leading the song, mind you, they meet once a month. This was November. And I want to say about 3 weeks later, this man passed away. And just like that, our elders are becoming ancestors. And what happens when everybody has passed away? Who is going to maintain the Black church? And it's like, I can understand from the standpoint of it is a harmful space for a lot of us. Yes, Christianity is a harmful theology for us, right? But the institution of the Black church, the fact that it's the social center, the way that we connect with each other, what happens when everybody's gone? And just the thought, like, are we passing this down to our children? Do they know what worship sounded like for our ancestors? Do they understand and appreciate call and response? Do they see us shout? Do they understand what that looks like? I can say for myself, my daughter doesn't know this. She's 13. She hasn't had the Black church experience because she has only attended mega churches. So she doesn't know what it's like culturally. And that's really hard. You know what I mean? I am somebody who has traced my genealogy, and so my connection to my ancestry is really important to me. So then my next question is this. Should this be preserved just for the purpose of cultural identity? And should I be someone who takes this project on? What I see myself doing is gathering photos, video, and audio, but in a way where I can still honor the practice, even if I'm an ex-Christian, even if I don't subscribe to the theology and the doctrine, I can still go into these spaces knowing how to dress, knowing how to talk, understanding my place in there, but just documenting it just so we can have it to pass down. And this isn't saying that absolutely nobody out there is documenting. But this will just be a project specifically for this so that we have something more, because we need to document as much as we can. So what do y'all think? Like, do y'all think this needs to be preserved? Is this something I should do? Will pastors welcome me if they know I'm not even a Christian? I don't know. So comment, let me know. Let's have a conversation in my comments. And also ways that you can support would be, let me know if there's churches that you feel like I should visit. I want to start compiling a list. I want to start working on logistics and just trying to see and feel, if this is something I can take on. I want to start reaching out to pastors. You know what I mean? I don't know. I just feel some type of connection to this work. And when I look back at my own art practice, I have been documenting, even though I didn't have the language for it. So yeah, I'm considering starting this new project. So let me know, y'all. Let's talk about it.
Okay, link to her page is below. I am obsessed with her page. She has done, I think, a 12-part walk through the evolution of Christianity from the beginning of the New Testament all the way through like Roman occupation, how the Ethiopian Bible came to be, manifest destiny. Like she has outlined it in from like an anthropological point of view, instead of like, oh, well, clearly this is like what God always meant to do, and like it's much more of a historic, objective point of view of how the monster that is Christianity today, as it shows up in the world, came to be. I find it fascinating. And going back to something that I just said, I do think that this kind of work needs to be done. I think that and these are just my thoughts. Feel free to leave yours in the comment section, but also definitely follow her and share your thoughts with her also, because she would be the person actually doing this work. But I do think that we in general need to be having more conversations like this, especially if you are descendants of the survivors of the transatlantic slave trade. Personally, me, Shayna, while I do not identify with the Christian faith at this point, I do recognize the historic and anthropological significance that it has, especially among Black people and Black descendants of the transatlantic slave trade. And honestly, not even just from the transatlantic slave trade, because the way that in the Americas, Black people have been force-fed Christianity and have had to morph it into a tool of survival, of getting information across, while also pocketing little seed nuggets, little collectives of our history, of our pre-colonial spirituality into the mix of this, while also trying not to get beaten for practicing or remembering languages or traditions that we had before the mass kidnappings, rapes, and murders. There's so much history. There's so much survival. There's so much in that we are still living in today, and even in Africa. When the Christian missionaries came, I don't know when I'm going to do this, but as soon as it is up, and if I can remember that it's in this video, I'm going to tag it right up there. There is a letter from King Leopold, who, as far as I know at this point, committed the largest genocide in human history. That I know, well, I mean, as it relates to like Africa, from what I know, there could be more. If there's more, let me know. But he wrote a letter to Christian missionaries to go to Africa, and the way and what was written in that letter outlines a lot of what I've seen anyway in African churches to this day. I think, just me, Shayna, once again, let me know your thoughts on this. There's so much history. In the same way that, unfortunately, for a lot of people to understand what is happening in politics right now in the West, you have to have at least some understanding of the Christian Bible. You have to have at least some foundational understanding of scriptures, of certain stories, of primary characters. To understand the politics that people are surviving today, to fully understand like the Epstein files and like where they drew inspiration, where Jeffrey drew inspiration. Like there has to be an understanding of this because of how it's showing up in society. And I think that the Black church, from a historic an anthropological point of view, to understand so much of the history of Black culture in the Americas, because it has been forced to be entwined with the church, and then we had to redefine it to not just make it make sense to us, but for us to use parts of it as a tool. It needs to be preserved. Not necessarily that folks need to be going and like all that, but I'm almost thinking more as like a museum. Not like a singular museum, but like a collective, an archive, a space where people can go and learn and connect the dots. Because I just think that's really important. And I also think that would be really important, not just for Christians, but for non-Christians too. Like there's so much in the experience that a lot of people, and what I see, once again, there's so many Christians that are mad at me in these comment sections. There's a lot that we experience as Black people. I will use I statements. There's a lot that I have experienced as a Black person who grew up in the church that, how do I word this? 1 second. Okay. That through the church and through like the song that was shared earlier in this video, there is a spiritual experience that I had in listening to that. And in growing up in the church, a lot of what I would have considered to be spiritual experiences, I was told to associate it to the Bible, to Jesus, to the Father, to a man. When in actuality, that spiritual experience was a deep, long-standing possibly even epigenetic connection
Can you
to
pause it, Pocket
ancestors,
Locker?
to
Okay. And I say that not because I don't think what she's saying is great. It's just so that's not a copyright issue. Um, as many of our audience members will know, I've had a couple of near-death experiences. Um, well, it's not the best way to phrase it. I've had one near-death experience. I've done things where I should have been dead medically a couple of times. But the one that was the near death experience, when she talks about spiritual stuff, I think people are trying to get to where I was and what was happening to me physically because I was unaware that I had become diabetic and my blood sugar was estimated, they don't know, to be over 800. Um, a healthy person like yourself, Pocket Locker, right now, your blood sugar is probably around 88. Big difference. 300 is bad. 200, you probably had a piece of strawberry shortcake or something like that, and then your blood sugar will fall off back down to the 80s. During that time, I was in the Caribbean with my ocean view, oceanfront apartment, and I'm laying there on the bed dying. What my body did is my brain said, I'm going to turn off all the stuff I don't need, right? I have to keep the heart beating. I have to keep the lungs breathing and so on. Everything that's in my autonomic system to keep me alive stayed on. But what shut off was a damn near everything else. Uh, the result is my brain even stopped making me aware of the differences between myself and things like a mouse or a computer, the bed that I was laying on, the lights in the room, the sand on the beach outside, the wind, the waves, like everything my eyes could perceive felt as if they were a part of me. Um, the sense of oneness was astonishing. And if people are trying to reach God, right, to feel the divine presence or Holy Spirit or anything like that, that's probably about the feeling they're hoping for, the way I felt when my brain simply wasn't making the distinction between me and other things, right? Buddhists talk about that feeling of oneness that can be achieved. Well, I'm here to tell you, it can. However, obviously, chemically, some really serious stuff was going on within my brain and within my body. But you, I was an atheist when this happened. I'd be willing to bet you if we had, hey, define this spirituality for me. What's it supposed to feel like? How are you supposed to know? People who are possessed with the Holy Spirit, how are you supposed to know? What's it feel like? And I'd be willing to wager most people would kind of get to where I was or try. They would try. I don't think they'd have an easy time making it plain, like I think I make it plain, where there's just this feeling of oneness. There's no separation between myself and anything else that I can observe or even recall, even remember, right? If I was thinking about my, one of my bicycles or um, my apartment or dear friends or something like that, that I would love to see. Um, I think they're trying to arrive at that place when they say that. Uh, to roll it into the Black experience, I think, is merely the idea of trying to see it from one's perspective when you're Black. I'm sure there's a Ukrainian version, and I'm sure there is an Arabic version, and that there is a Eastern Mississippi version of it. I don't know that it's unique because we're all essentially, I guess it's the chili cook-off, Pocket Locker. um, it's supposed to be chili. Like the minimum definition is you have to bring chili, and how you season it is what makes it unique compared to others. You know.
All right, let me let her finish. I think she's almost done.
Mhm.
Oh, it muted over.
To a thread that connects to as a deep, long-standing, possibly even epigenetic connection to ancestors, to history, to a thread that connects all the way back past the plantations, past the plains of West Africa, past all of that, that like it's a through line, a frequency that my body remembered. And I think to track the not the progression, the trauma, the way that certain things have been manipulated, reformed, evolved. We need we need to preserve certain things. We need to be able to look back at certain things, to identify certain things, so that way we can connect the patterns. So that way, if something like this terror were to happen again, we could at least track the pattern to know that it's happening again. Now, does that mean that every little Black boy, girl, and child needs to grow up in the Black church to know what that means? No. No. In my opinion, no. But there are other ways to still pass down that information. There are other ways for them to still learn without having to go through the experience of Christianity. Let me know if that makes sense, because it makes sense to me. Yes, it makes sense to me. But let me know. I just
All right, that's yeah. So that's what we're talking about today. Yeah. So I don't know. For me personally, I'll just jump straight into it. Like I'm not just coming at this. I'm an anthropologist. I teach cultural anthropology. I do anthropology. I teach other classes. Not really feel like getting into that right now. But this is heavily related to like a particular project of mine, which is actually trying to establish an anthropological framework where we look at faith systems and understand them as basically inherently false, untrue phenomena, and really it's trying to analyze why do they continue to enjoy this epistemic privilege? Where does this power and privilege come from? Because it is power and privilege. Like people who belong to certain cults, people who believe in certain conspiracies. We correct those people. There are social sanctions and certainly corrective measures. But religion is in this other class where, well, it's just a different subclass where it's still an inherently untrue phenomena, but there's all this structural and social and cultural permissiveness that comes up. So I don't have a neutral take on this. This is something that's really important to me. But with all that being said, like no, like I just all of that's a hard no for me. First off, most of that groundwork has already been done. There's plenty of scholarship on that stuff. It's like reminds me of teaching like my students who are like doing their first digital evolution class, and like there's certain at the end of the class they have to come up with their own experiment, and there are certain experiments that inevitably almost every year students are going to want to do. And there's almost certain projects where like I want to ban them. Like I'm pretty sure I'm going to ban them. Like you can't do this project, and that's exactly why. It's because
Fuck, I'm lucky. You cut out. Okay, so I can't tell if Pocket Locker is still broadcasting and I'm booted, or he's booted and I'm still broadcasting.
fucking.
There you go.
I don't know what the hell's going on.
I don't know either. Welcome back.
All right, I gotta change machines.
I keep storing these in my. Oh,
I don't need the screen share. All right. Can you hear me?
I hear you well. Mm-hmm.
Oh, I had this like fucking muted. So yeah, it reminds me of like every year, like it's like, you know, like just people who are new to the game and don't realize this type of scholarship exists. Can you hear me, my one black friend?
I hear you very well. Yes.
I can't hear you for some reason. Let me figure out what that is. I don't know why I can't hear you. Hang on. Let me see what my audio is set to. I thought I solved the sound issues on my other machine, and I guess I didn't. Actually, wasn't it? Yeah, I don't know. It's been like something else like all day. First, it was my sound. First, it was my camera, and then I fixed that, and then it was the mixer. Now I can't hear anything. Let me see. I don't even know what machine is the right one to use. I literally can't hear anything. I have no idea what's happening right now.
Testing 1 2 3. Testing 1 2 3. Testing 1 2 3.
All right, hang on. Let me play this video.
Ready for takeoff?
Whoa. We're gonna hold on my stump. What's the problem? I ain't have.
All right, now I can hear. Hopefully you can still hear me.
I hear you.
Great. All right. So yeah, so one, it's just like a lot of this research has already been done for people that are interested in it. I you know, when I was interested in it, I actually like, you know, came up going to churches. Like I went, like my grandfather's church is pretty much, I don't know, they might be a little bit further along than that. They certainly believe in instruments and things, but I get all the feeling and the connection with the ancestors and all that, but the problem for me is it's just like it's just not time for that. Like it's this way in which people, even people who have allegedly, you know, deconstructed or left the church, there's still this romanticization of the church that totally doesn't take on the critical analysis. It doesn't identify the fact that this is a cult. and Christianity is not true, and there's a way in which Christianity is being weaponized right now, particularly against Black people, that like we need Black people to fall out of love with Christianity. And even though it feels, I get it, and this is why I'm calling it blackwashing, it feels like a very critical secular place. Like, oh, I'm not saying it's true. I'm not saying I'm a believer. I'm not saying I'm going to church on Sunday. But what I am saying is we just need to document it and preserve it, because it's part of our history and it's part of our identity, and we don't know how to connect. We needed to connect with our ancestors, and all of that is supposed to be very powerful emotional motivation, but you're not dealing with the elephant in the room. And number one, you got to understand, you're living in a situation of Christian, like, this is not going to be a project. If it did the critical things it needs to do, it's not a project Christians are going to get behind. If it's not a project Christians can get behind, it's just not going to happen. Like, and Black people aren't the only people that do this. Like, this is where I get into like the liberal whitewashing. That's a frequent topic on my channel. Subscribe to Pocket Locker 86 if you're not already subscribed. But it's like, I want to talk about the blackwashing too, because that's really important. And part of it is when you tell yourself certain narratives about yourself, those narratives matter. And we're in a time where we need to take power away from Christianity. The reason it's funny to hear this on Shayna's channel is because Shayna's channel focuses a lot on what she calls decentering men. And that's not necessarily like hating men or changing your sexual orientation or something crazy like that. It's literally decentering men. It's recognizing the patriarchy. It's recognizing the hierarchy. It's recognizing the harm. And it's recognizing that, like, yo, it's embodied. It's embodied in these people. And we have to decenter these people, right? And a similar thing needs to happen with Christianity. Christianity needs to be decentered. We need to stop acting like this cult is the core of our identity. And even though, again, I know these people are very well intentioned, you're reinforcing that message when you insist that we have to preserve the church and we have to preserve the religious traditions because they're such an important part of our identity. No, they're actually not. A death cult is by definition not an important part of our identity, especially when it's not true. Now, again, am I trying to be completely dismissive of the historical reality of the central role that the church has played in the life of Black Americans? No, not at all. Well, what I am saying is that is not something that continues to need to take center stage. That is something we can understand our culture and our history and identity beyond it. And yes, we can speak candidly, and we should speak candidly about the role that Christianity has played in our enslavement, in limiting our autonomy, in the fact that we did have to, center our social lives around the church because we were marginalized and excluded from other domains of life. Okay, but that is not a romantic, warm and fuzzy, preservation of the Black church. No, it's basically a critical race analysis of American history. And that part we can do. And again, we have that. We have African American museums. We have slavery museums. And we have, again, great scholarship that has been done. Again, I wrote about this shit when I was in college. I wrote about this shit my freshman, like when I started college, like before that documentary Soundtrack to a Revolution was even out. That movie is killer. Like, people should check that movie out, Soundtrack to a Revolution. It's a great documentary. And then even in grad school, I wrote about, cultural transformation in the Black church. It was called like Going to Church Naked. It was about like just the differences in the way Black women dress in church. But again, like, that's part of the history people don't want to talk about. So for instance, like my mother's generation, for them, it's pretty normal to wear something that's shorter sleeves or even sleeveless, even like to work or in like a professional setting. But to women that are like my grandmother's generation, they would call that basically going to church naked, because again, like for them, you're supposed to be like fully covered or whatever. So you could even see things where like, a young Black woman might go to a church now with a skirt that is down to her knees or higher. But in reality, a couple generations ago, like, you would have been shunned and treated all types of nasty in the church for showing up in a skirt like that. And they're skipping over that part, right? There's a reason them churches is all 50, 60 plus. 50 plus is even being romantic. It's really like 60, 70 plus these days. And there's a reason for that. It's because of how oppressive those cultures were. It's because of how suffocating it was to be in relationship with people like that. How just dominating and, yes, all consuming and cult like their entire personalities are. How homophobic they are, how misogynist they are. Like all of these things, their biblical literalism and the way they abuse their children. Like this was the spare the rod, spoil the child, go get the switch off the tree generation. And so people don't want to talk about those things, but when you just say like, oh, it's how I connect with my ancestors, and oh, the songs, like, it's just like, no, like, really, like, no, like, I'm like, part of our analysis got like, stop, like, just stop, like, let it go, leave it alone. The shit is not true. And again, like, it really sucks because it's the people who are supposed to be deconstructed. It's the people who are supposed to be leftist. It's the people who are supposed to be trying to help us move forward. And we can't move forward because y'all won't move on. It's this, what you realize, it's this obsession with Christianity. I even see it, like, you see it with a lot of white leftists now. They want to do their Bible studies and they talk about, oh, my grandmother's church, it was so sweet, everybody there was so nice, they just wanted to love Jesus. And then we would go into the basement and eat sandwiches and fried chicken, and it was so wonderful. And it's like, yeah, and every single one of them motherfuckers voted against the rights of people like me. You forget that them same congregations, them same churches used to go in and had a little church picnics and then go watch Black people get lynched. Like, it is this, it is the cherry picking. You want to do the cherry picking for them. And so again, I'm not suggesting that there isn't any historical or sociological or anthropological value to understanding these patterns. But what I am telling you is that an effort to preserve them, because they're so unique to our identity and to our culture. One is a failed project from the gate. It's a failed project from the gate. The one thing Christianity can never do is be honest about Christianity. So again, you will never find Christian support for a secular project. Like, you will never find Christian support for a secular project that is basically analyzing, the history and all of that stuff. And without their support, it is something that they will just simply attack. And so the only way to get their support, and that's what they want. Please understand, these people are selling us up the river. I'm just here to tell you. I'm just here to warn you. Because what they want to do is they want to make amends. They always talk about truth and reconciliation, but these people want reconciliation, but they don't want truth. So what they really want is they want to still fit in. This is the desire to be accepted. This stems from our inability to accept that our family raised us in a cult and that we are no longer a member of that cult. And then as such, we are outside of identity alignment with our family, with our community, with our culture. And with that, they take the relationships from us. They don't see us the same way. We're ostracized, we're marginalized, we're treated like the black sheep of the family. Sometimes they even take us outside our whole culture. They basically tell us we can't really be black. We're not really black anymore, because to be black to them is inherently to be a part of this religion. And so since that hurts so much and we don't want to deal with that, subconsciously we find other ways to try to say, hey, look, see me and love me. I'm still part of this family. See me and appreciate me. And one of the ways we do that is we find ways to continue to center and to romanticize the cult. That way we can say, look, I'm still a fan. Look, I still think that this is essential to who I am. I still think that I can't understand my own identity without preserving this church. But you have to understand that for them, the cult is always about the cult's business. The cult doesn't care about your historical analysis. So the only way that they are going to accept a project like this is it has to be subverted to their narrative from the jump. So anything that's too harsh or talks about the faith claims in a way that doesn't legitimize the faith claims, that's not going to be a part of this. Nope, that's not going to get approved. Anything that talks about all of the abuse and all the exploitation, that's not going to be talked about. The way the historical analysis of even why aren't y'all in the church? The girl said it herself. She said, my daughter's only ever been to a mega church. Why didn't you raise your daughter in a church like that? Because you knew how they were. You knew how ugly it was up in there. You had to get yourself out of there, and you had to go to a liberal, moderate, probably totally whitewashed version of Christianity so you could get it. So you don't even really want to worship with our people like that. Y'all don't even want to be a part of the denominations that really are the core of the Black church.
Let me jump into
go ahead. Yeah, because I could go for hours.
You can. And you may want to tell people, because there'll be some new viewers, about your grandparents, and I think that's where a lot of your passion comes from, seeing what a grip this has had on them and how that has affected your life. You may want to go into that a little bit. No secret to our audience, I like classic vehicles, classic cars, classic trucks, and stuff like that. I don't like them all, but there's quite a few I'm fond of. I have a 57 Chevy truck. Underneath it, there's all this modern stuff that was never around in 1955, 1956, or 1957. Never. On the inside, there will be all this modern stuff that they never put on those trucks back then. The reason why is I want it to be comfortable. I want it to be high performance and loads of other attributes I want it to have that it doesn't. There are people that will look at my truck and say, oh, it looks nice, but it's not true to the General Motors heritage that it, essentially was designed to honor. You've made all these changes. I didn't want a time capsule. It sounds like these two ladies are looking for a time capsule. Not that they're interested in practicing what they have seen, but preserving it as an artifact for future generations to understand. One of my was an anthropology teacher. Yeah, he said behavior is an artifact. What people do and what they have done in the past is an artifact that gives us a window into who individuals were, into who societies were, people groups, that sort of thing. If you see the Avatar movies, James Cameron, I don't know, other than the technology to make those movies, what he invented in terms of the tradition of the Na'vi people. I'm assuming like nothing. I'm assuming everything is claimed from some existing and still pre-existent and still existing culture on this planet, down to the chanting, the way they encircle themselves, the way that they revere nature in this manner or that manner, how they interface with it might be a uniqueness, I'd say, to some degree, because they're using that little ponytail organ, whatever it's called, to do that with some creatures or things. There is a desire by many people to want to be a part of that because they want to, maybe their current life has some sort of emptiness that they think the old ways can fulfill. So they embrace some of the old ways, or some people will immensely say, I'm going to immerse myself in the whole thing. I'm going to have the full experience as best I can in modern times. You can find people who will live biblically for a period of time, meaning they will follow to the letter what the Bible says to do or some other ancient book. And they want to see how their life changes. What are the key differences that they feel within themselves, that they see the people around them, how they are affected, maybe how their family is affected by it. Here in Indiana, we have a lot of Amish communities. I feel even that's changed. They tend to shun modern technology, even to where a zipper is something fancy. Well, shoot, I could take you to a community where there's kids in horse-drawn carriages with like 15-inch subwoofers in the back. Like that's where they are now, as opposed to looking away from stuff like that entirely, saying, no, that's modern. I don't want any part of it. Cultures change, cultures evolve for better or for worse. I don't know if there's a museum for what she's trying to do. If you have an opportunity to visit Savannah, Georgia, uh, it's like Second African Baptist Church or something like that. Is a church that's I think it's the oldest standing church from built by enslaved peoples or former enslaved peoples in the United States. And when I mentioned earlier in the podcast, like, oh, we're going to discuss if the Hebrews are black, they have Arabic, Ethiopian, and Hebrew inscribed in the pews there. And this church is hundreds of years old. And that's what's written there on the pews. I have photographic evidence of it that I took. I couldn't believe it. I heard about it, and so I made the trip there to see it. And there were people at that time, right? They wanted to preserve something about the various cultures of the people who were attending in that church. Some of them still slaves going there on Sundays. You know, some of them freed people. That's how they financed it. Freed slaves had paid a large part in building and financing the building of that church. So in looking back, I think to some degree, we hope to see ourselves. And maybe what these ladies are after is to help other people understand that this is what our ancestors did. Not that it makes it right, pocket rock, but it's simply stating these were their procedures. These were the lengths that they were willing to go to. This is what they thought worked, right? When I call some people out on the validity of Christianity as truth, I'll say, hey, look, let me take you to Mark 16, chapter 16. And we'll just read verses like 16 to 20. Can you lay hands on people and heal them? Because Jesus says those who believe in him will be able to do this. And when they can't do it, does that invalidate the rest of it? Because this is the head guy saying this. This is the head guy saying it. Right, it should be good enough, right? If walking on water is good enough to prove he's a miracle worker, if him healing the sick and raising the dead is proof enough that he was a miracle worker, might him being wrong about something be proof enough that a lot of other story elements are fictional? Might that not be the tell to show us, hey, you know, this is not so different than Mars or Apollo or Zeus? They're stories, and they're meant to help people understand how to live a better life in the world. I think we can easily apply that to these ladies looking to find ways to preserve those old ways of the church. I'm with you, Pakalaka, in believing that they're not necessarily the best ways to pass on knowledge. The Christian church is not necessarily the best way to pass on morality. And I'm not saying the Buddhists know it all either. I'm not saying the Muslim knows that they know it all. I don't know that any of us know it all. The best thing we can do is respect each other, give each other the space we need to be ourselves, help each other out when we can, and keep on trying. Our Constitution for the United States of America starts with "we the people in order to form a more perfect union." That idea of something being better than it was should never die. We should always be looking to make it better with every innovation to make a new law, maybe because of a technology or something. We shouldn't just forget about that, because it may be useful to people who are around 300 years from now, where they go, I'm glad they did that. And it looks like we don't need that anymore. We're past that. Nobody does that anymore.
So that's the tension I'm trying to address, which is people talk about making a more perfect union, making things better, but I'm trying to help people understand how sometimes, even with the best of intentions, we're the reason things don't get better. And so part of my analysis is not questioning their motivation. Like I said, their motivation is fine. It's cool. Like, people want to preserve their culture. But for me, the structural analysis is how does the cult, in this case, Christianity, how does it maintain that epistemic privilege? Because I know it's not true. I know it's not real, but it's in power. And that power is being used very critically to oppress people that I care about. So that's so there's the thing. We have to first understand where I'm coming from. That's a problem. I've just identified a problem.
Okay, well, let me address that.
Okay.
It is real. It may not be true. We know parts of it are not true. But we have individuals that cast those facts. We see it today in our society, in our government. They will cast facts aside in order to continue forward.
That's my
cast
point.
Them aside.
That's
continue forward.
So that's my point. But the rest of us are the reason that's happening. We're the ones who are sanctioning that. If somebody says the earth is flat, we say no, it's not. And then we either ostracize them and make fun. We laugh about them, we make fun of them, or we demand that they look at the evidence. We show them the pictures. We have them fly to Alaska or whatever with YouTubers and scientists and take
Antarctica.
Pictures of the whole whatever that whole thing was. Right? If somebody says to you, I think vaccines cause autism, we go, no. We know that that's not true. Let me show you. We send them the papers. We go through the court cases and help them understand that was a scam. And then we have Dr. Fauci tell them, like, yo, no, vaccines are safe, right? Like, that's what I mean when I say epistemic privilege. Most things that either are not true, or let's say they're evidently not true or not evidently true, we go after. With this religion thing, we shelter it. Now how does that become a problem? It becomes a problem because everybody, I shouldn't say everybody, but it's currently being used as the source of power, right? There's people who are doing a lot of harmful things, and every time we ask them, why are you doing this thing, they tell us they're doing it because of that untrue thing. So it's the epistemic privilege combined with power that makes it a tool of oppression. Okay, so now you have people who what I'm trying to understand is, why won't we go at the epistemic privilege? When you have your enemy has exposed their greatest vulnerability, that's what you attack immediately. Because that's how you end things. right? If our enemy is coming at us, and the vulnerability is, you could just go around the back and then climb up the ladder, take the king out, and be done with it. That's exactly what we do when we get on with it. So I have to analyze, why is it that everybody knows there's no evidential reason to believe this stuff, but we're not attacking that so that we can remove it as the source of these people's power? So how does that relate to them? Now I got to understand structurally, where does the focus come in? The focus comes in because this is how it works. So I'm trying to show people, I'm not trying to demonize them like they're doing something terrible, but I'm trying to show you how it works. How it works is, in the midst of the struggle, people who are allegedly aligned with the opposition, the people they should be resisting, they're people who, if they left the church or they don't believe it, they're a very unique case for people like me, because they're the people who's like, you don't even believe this stuff. Okay, cool. You see all the problems it's causing. Cool. So then when my question is, now what are you going to do about it? They go to, I'm going to preserve it culturally because it's a huge part of my identity. And I want to preserve that. Okay. That is one of the mechanisms that we identify as how these people stay in power. They stay in power because people are uncomfortable confronting things that are important to their identity. So this is a great embodiment of that. We see people who are secular, people who are on the left, people who are definitely concerned about the problems in the world and would actually say they're trying to do something about it. We see how even they get swept up in the romanticization of their culture and their identity. And notice what you don't have as a result. You don't have an effort to preserve the truly African culture, the culture that our ancestors had before they came over here. Because again, you're so obsessed with Christianity. You're not looking at the diversity of cultural practices, even amongst the slaves, that they weren't all Christian. But we're so hyper-focused on Christianity. We're not talking about the different Native American, right? Again, when you start to realize, you start to play that game, you start to say, like, so what is it? We're just going to preserve everybody's faith traditions because they're unique to everybody's culture. So, like, again, that's an interesting kind of social project, but right now it's not. And the thing is, you have to realize everybody's interested in their own history. So that's fine. But again, now is not the time. Now, let me hit you with one more thing. Sure. We build a Holocaust museum because it's important. We build slavery museums to remember the transatlantic slave trade because it's important. We build World War I museums because it's important. But we don't do those things in the middle of the goddamn war. So you're having your time capsule perspective. You want to put actual effort and social capital into the time capsule project. No, we do that when we look back. We're not looking back right now. Right now, we need to take the power away from Christianity. And then once we do that, once the matter's settled, we can build the museum. But this is the effort to construct a museum to the faith that is oppressing us while it is actively oppressing us. And again, I'm not trying to demonize these people. I'm trying to explain to the audience how this happens structurally. And this is a great example of how this happens structurally, because it's so easy to romanticize things that we consider essential for our culture and our identity. And in doing so, we maintain their structural focus. We keep Christianity at the center. And rather than telling people, I don't believe Christianity, let's talk about all the harm it's done and all the oppression, it becomes, let's talk about the songs, the recipes, and how to connect to our ancestors.
Years ago, I was working in South Carolina, in the Charlotte area. And I got an opportunity to photograph some Civil War reenactors. These are people who were reenacting for the Southern side. And I mean, talk about access. Everyone as part of that project, was told, answer all his questions, pose for all his photographs, whatever you need. They were firing cannons for me and stuff like that. Just, I could document everything. I love talking to these guys. Like, why do you do this? And this, of course, is long after the Civil War. So this is probably 12 years ago. I think I was there. And the uniforms, people made their own uniforms. These guys sewed their uniforms, or they worked with their grandma to make it and stuff like that. If they could just buy one off the shelf, because some of them didn't want to, right? They wanted, what was it like to have to fix this thing when it got broken? Because they were doing that. They would get snagged on something. You'd be, they could get some sort of demerit or something for being out of uniform if their uniform was too tattered. Obviously in battle, that's going to happen, but there was an expectation that they adhered to for a time while this, activity was going on. I don't think I spoke to a single racist during what was I there, like a week or something like that. No one talked to me that way, like they were, but they wanted to sort of identify with their ancestors. Again, they were the living museum to some degree, Pocket Locker. A brother of mine has a Civil War rifle, like a super rare Civil War rifle. The best time to collect those is during the war, not after. If you want to preserve a bunch of them, it's during the war. Because after, you're going to see ones that are maybe damaged a lot of the time. You got to sort through a lot of them to get a good one, maybe. Some things don't have a long, useful life. What you're talking about here is culture. Things people did, things people do. If they're taking video, taking audio, as I did when I was in Georgia, as I did when I was in South Carolina, you have what you have. And you try to capture as much as you can to show people. If you wait till it's over, you're getting the interpretations of the interpretations, and you may not be getting the facts themselves. I never interviewed a single Civil War soldier because they were all dead by the time I was born. Maybe one or two of them were alive, but most of them were dead before I was born. So that opportunity is gone. We have books, and obviously there were some recordings done of these people's struggles, and what the townspeople in the various towns went through themselves. There's evidence of what they left behind, their interpretations, some actual photographs, maybe some actual film. I don't know when movies were invented. I think it was like the 19-teens or something like that. But some of those people might have been recorded talking about their experiences. So what is to be preserved may not necessarily need to stay in practice, Pocket Lock. And I think that's part of your point. We don't need this to continue. But it's a place where humanity, especially in this country, has trodden, right? We left our tracks there. Is this the path forward to a better future? I don't believe so, but there are a lot of people who do. How do you show them that they're wrong? We have our ways, we talked about it here, but what are they left with? What is the value? I think an important thing that you have to give them when you take their belief away is a place to go. Where do they go from here?
I don't have to give them shit. It's a
I'm
different conversation, but it's a serious conversation.
Okay, it's a serious conversation, and you're wrong.
Why am I wrong? I'm saying is that's not my responsibility. I'm a grown ass person. Nobody gave me anything. When I left, nobody gave me shit.
There
I had to piece it together. I had to put it together. I had to figure out what does it mean. Where do I get my? And to be honest with you, I think that's a huge part of the problem with the atheist whole thing. It's why the whole atheism project isn't moving. Is because atheists are still so fucking obsessed with the Bible themselves that most of them don't have a foundation for their identity, for their morality, for their ethics outside of the book. Because again, they're just so obsessed with it. So to me, I'm just saying
Oh.
my responsibility is to tell a motherfucker, I don't think your shit is true. Now, some people think that means I have to, and some of y'all, again, that'll be your side project. I'm just saying that's not a project I'm taking on because I think it's their responsibility to move on. Like I'm not, I think it's a form of infantilization. It's like, no, I should be able to tell you the cult is sitting on some bullshit and you should be able to wake up tomorrow and realize you still got to go to work. You still got to pay your taxes. You still got to be a decent neighbor. You still should be a loving member of the family. And once you live in that for a little bit, you'll figure the rest out. You'll be okay. You'll be all right.
All right. A lot of people like to fast track that process. So one of the, I guess it was a trans-denominational church they call themselves that I went to. One of their songs had this beautiful lyric in it that said, I am more than this. And I think for the believer, whatever faith you're in, when you're confronting someone like Pocket Locker or myself, who will sort of give you hints or data as to why your faith may not necessarily be true. Your faith tradition could be based on some falsehoods, regardless of how good it feels to believe, right? It could be based on some falsehoods. My thinking is that you are greater than that faith. Just speaking from my personal life of how it is now, I've been talking with my brother and my sister and some friends about a lot of the stuff that I really went for in life, like a career in the movies as an actor and writer and also in television, that just didn't work out. But if you could talk to 6-year-old me or even 4-year-old me, I knew that's what I wanted to do. Within the space of that and all the things I could own with all the money I could make, there was the idea of also being a father and having, a wife and doing things with my family and stuff like that. Well, most of my dreams didn't come true, but every day I come home to my family. So out of all that didn't happen, the best part of it the whole time, right? If it all did happen, the best part would still be the only part I got to keep. The only part I truly got to experience. I went to some amazing parties. I worked on movies. I worked on TV shows. I traveled different places in the world on the company dime, all that stuff. I don't have millions of dollars. I'm living in someone else's home, right? I don't have what I used to. I still haven't sold my house. Blah, blah, problem after problem after problem after problem. But the best part of everything I wanted, I have. For those who we confront Pocket Locker, who thought that heaven and being with God and Jesus and seeing relatives that have passed away again was supposed to be even better than that, right? The family they craved, the love that they craved. You and I, Pocket Locker, we are thieves of a kind, ripping that away from them when we simply put forth challenges like Mark 16, chapter 16, verse 16 through 20. Come on, like this is demonstrably in this moment. You should be able to prove to me you have this power and you don't. So he lied. And I can get deep in the weeds as someone who's read the Bible multiple times. I can get deep in the weeds and show you again and again and again and again and again where it fails, again and again and again and again where it's not true. What each of those people that hear those messages must realize, there's a part of it that is really good that you wanted. And regardless, because the rest isn't necessarily so, or ain't necessarily so as the song goes, you still have it. And that's where you need to put your energy. That's where you need to put your focus. And at the end of the day, you still have you. If you don't have the spouse, if you don't have the children, if you don't have those friendships, you're still here. And you have to decide, hey, how do I want to orient myself? What are my new goals? What do I want to achieve with the time I have left on this earth? Because the afterlife, the clock's going to keep on ticking. It just stops for you, right? Your molecules return to the earth one way or another. And you no longer participate on a conscious level.
Yeah, so my thing is I just come at that very differently than most people do. I think this is why we have another crisis, which I would call the crisis of spirituality. And it's this thing where people move, from religion to spirituality, or even, try to move into spirituality as the true thing that religion was trying. Like, it's like it becomes a battle between spirituality and religion. And I just think part of it is that's what happens when you're raised in a cult. And this country is mostly a cult. And it's like you have this idea that you're supposed to have this like magical specialness about you. And so, yeah, when somebody comes and tells you that shit is not real, you feel like something's been taken from you. But my thing is, you felt like you were missing something you didn't need in the first place. Like, I'm fine being regular. I'm fine being normal. I appreciate the mundane. I appreciate being part of nature. I appreciate being an animal. I appreciate being an ape. So I don't need that. Even when you talked earlier about, her talking about the spiritual experiences she's felt in church, and then you talked about, the oneness you felt when, you had your near-death experience. I'm just totally not interested. Like, I don't even. That's just me. Like, I just don't even get why people.
Okay, you
care.
teach anthropology. You're going to see in your travels and in your reading, man, there are people who took substance. You know what I'm trying to say?
Substances. Yeah,
I still can't say it. That's what I'm trying to say. To change the way that they perceive reality, hoping to perceive reality better, or what they thought was better, right? It could just be different. But because it isn't the day-to-day, they feel as if they've stepped into the unseen world pocket locker. And the rest of the people who don't do this don't get it, right? The shaman of the village is the only one who truly understands life. The shaman in the village, not the oldest people, the shaman who has access to the psychedelics all the time. That guy gets it on another level that no one else in the village will. Well, that isn't necessarily true. It's just the shaman takes something and it alters his perception of things.
Right.
It doesn't mean that the world actually functions the way that it did when he was high.
Right.
It doesn't.
Yeah.
So it's just another viewpoint. In fact, at that same trans-denominational church, the chief reverend of it used to say something that I thought was just brilliant. He would share with you some really beautiful piece of insight and then follow it up with, don't get high on it.
No, that's cool. No, that's good. That's good.
Yeah. Don't you dare think that that's the pinnacle of understanding.
Yeah.
Don't you dare think you can ascend to that for a moment, because you gotta come back down. So don't get high. Don't even go up there with it. Stay down here with it. And view your life, or add that to the way that you approach life down here where the rest of us are. So I think the idea, obviously we're going to disagree. I think the idea of preserving what those traditions are on video, on audio, in books is a fantastic idea. It doesn't mean that that's the way we ought to live, right? We see it in an interesting form in our modern times with all this stuff about certain files coming out. How people who are outraged about a whole lot less aren't angry enough. They just fold their arms when they should be like, we demand justice. They don't demand anything. But they're willing to cry about it when it was the other political side. When they thought it was somebody else, it was supposed to be resolved when they learned that it's on their side too. Well, they don't want to do anything about it. Some of the worst behaviors of human beings. They don't want to do a thing about it because they feel, well, those people are the people who run things. I don't have any control.
Well, that's what PC's comment about. Why do I have to change to placate the gullible and willfully ignorant? And that has become, but in a sense you do. And that's the thing. Like that's the structural analysis, is that people, that's exactly the point I keep coming back to. It is a subclass of untrue beliefs. Just think of it this way. It's not forget what you believe or don't believe. Like most people see the world this way. You see the world as there are things you are really, really confident they're true, right? There's things you pretty much know, right? Then there's other things where you're like, I don't really know much about that. Like if you told me, Jay, you could base a rocket fuel on like, some crude type of shit, or you could base some rocket fuel on like ethanol or like corn. I'd be like, I don't really know enough about rocket fuel to tell you one way or the other. So it's like, right? And then there's some things that I think are definitely not true, right? Again, dragons, the flat earth, vaccines cause autism, right? There's a whole category of phenomenon we think definitely not true. Okay. So for people like me, and I would say for most people, most of the time, faith systems fall into that, even for believers, right? Because we always say, like, believers, you think everything else is sitting on some bullshit except for your one true religion, right? So you even think everybody else's faith system is inherently untrue, right? That they're not even discomfortable saying that, right? So my thing is just, okay, so from an anthropological perspective, because it's literally what I'm trying to articulate as a scholar, from an anthropological perspective, I now treat faith systems as a class of inherently untrue phenomena, the same way we will with certain conspiracy theories and, magical, mystical beings or whatever, right? Again, but the difference comes in people who believe those things, we ridicule them, we mock them, or we confront them with the reality. We say, let me show you why you're wrong, right? Religion and faith systems get privileged. They don't get challenged. And if you challenge them, there are consequences. So again, the structural analysis is why. The answer is proximity to power, because they're in power, right? Because think about it this way. In a society like America, you might feel hesitant to speak hostily about Christianity in certain company, right? But in that same company, if you talk about Allah being God or Muhammad split the moon or whatever, that's fine. Like you could ridicule that other religion, you could make jokes about it, you don't have to worry about it, right? And think about this, this affects people like me, because when I go into a classroom, I have a lot of Christian students, but I also got some Muslim students. So it's interesting that there's more privilege and anxiety associated with defending the Christian students than there is with defending the Muslim students. And that's because of the cultural context that the institution exists in. The institution exists in a country where Christianity is the religion that is in privilege. Now, if I was teaching the same exact class, the same exact way in Saudi Arabia, I might feel reversed, right? It might be like, oh, like we could talk about those silly Christians over in America or those silly European Christians with their Jesus bullshit, right? But speak about Muhammad the wrong way, and the government might come knocking on your door, right? So it's not about whether one is more true. No, we're identifying a class of phenomenon. They're all untrue. So then we also see the cultural context. We see that which ones get this privilege is defined by the culture, and it's defined by which one is in power. So that's my point. Now, how does that again tie to what they're doing? Again, let's be real about what I call the constraints of time. We cannot preserve the full past. Like, it's just impossible to do. But we have to understand something. Every time we want to preserve or conserve or reach back to the past, that takes time and effort in the present. It takes present resources, and it creates future obligations. What do I mean by that? If I decide I want to take a picture of the snow outside of my house, I have to take time in the present to do that. I have to go grab my camera. I got to take a picture. I got to label the picture. I got to store the picture. I got to figure out when to save the picture, right? And there's absolutely no point in me doing that if I don't expect somebody in the future to also take time and resources to view said picture, right?
No, that's not true at all.
It's not all. It's you can do it for you, but if you're telling me you're doing this for anthropological, cultural preservation, and all that stuff, that implies the intent to be consumed. That's all I'm saying.
Most of the evidence that we have was to be used by the people who used it. If I look at arrowheads, for instance, that arrowhead was never made for me to find it 1,000 years later, hundreds of years later.
No, but what I'm saying
it was
is
made to be used.
But somebody paid somebody to go collect that arrowhead or take a picture of that arrowhead, and they would not have done that if they did not also think that it had future value. That's what I'm saying. I'm not saying people don't just take pictures for their own. I'm just talking about if we're going to stick to, or we're doing this for anthropological reasons or cultural reasons and all, or we're going to build a museum. That's all I'm saying, is that it implies a future intent. And here's the point. The point is to think that those, now you have to think through that framework. Those are very limiting resources. So here's the thing that is on my mind a lot as an anthropologist. And again, it's a different level of thinking than even most of my colleagues, because most of my colleagues don't do the anthropology of anthropology, right? So when I think about anthropology, I also think about the anthropology of anthropology, or more specifically, the anthropology of anthropologists. What does that mean? Again, what we choose to preserve or what we think is worth preserving is also culturally dictated, right? Part of what I was saying about them, when you have Black women talking to you and they say, oh, I want to preserve my heritage and my people, and we want to go back and maintain the Black church because, the Black church is how I understand okay, cool, we get that. Take a white person. White people feel the same way. Back in the day, the church was like this, and they sang these type of songs, and they did. Okay, cool. Native Americans everybody feels that way. Okay, so one, we have a real limiting factor. We literally cannot preserve everything from the past. That would be impossible. But to the extent that we want it to be meaningfully consumed in the future, we're also trading future time for the past. So what does that mean? It means we have to be very critical about what we think is worth preserving now and being consumed down the road, because it has to be worth the time right now. And more importantly, it has to be worth the time in the future. And so a lot of things are that way. It's just people don't think about how limiting that is. So then you have to ask yourself this other question: what and who do we preserve, right? And so, for instance, in anthropology, one of the things you notice is they're very interested in documenting people's beliefs, but they never get into how the beliefs are used or whether or not they're true or how they're used in power. It's just sort of like, these people believe this thing. And that is considered to be a very legitimate anthropological perspective. So again, from that perspective, it's fine. But some of us have criticisms of that, right? And for me, part of the criticism is when you go to preserve these things, you are still enacting a certain degree of commitment to them, and you recruit other people into that. It's the thing I have a critique when people talk about, oh, we got to have an awareness campaign and we got to educate people. You think that as an educator, I would always be on board with making people more aware of people and educating people on things. Actually, a lot of times I'm not. A lot of times I'm like, no, and I even teach my students this. Why? Because I want them to understand not just the value of educating people on something neutral. I want them to understand the ways in which trying to make people aware and trying to educate people has always been used structurally by power as a distraction. So you take things that people already know about or already should know about, and if they don't by this point, they're willfully ignorant. And instead of actually doing what needs to be done to address the power structures on behalf of the marginalized people, we focus on educating and creating awareness for the dominant class. And then what that does is it allows people to feel like when they've gone to sleep at night and they've educated somebody or they've helped with an awareness campaign, that they've really helped us tear down the structures that are oppressing people, and they've done nothing of the sort. So again, it's not saying that awareness is bad or that education is bad, but it's a critical analysis of the way that awareness and education energy and focus is used oftentimes in ways that are not as helpful as people think. And so this is a similar analysis about preserving the Black church. Number one is to say, right now we're in the midst of a fight. And like Uncle Bobby says about the abuser, remember what Uncle Bobby tells us about when a person's in an abusive relationship. He doesn't just tell us the 4 ways to identify it. He tells us that no matter what, you do not legitimize the influence of the abuser. You never tell your friend that's being beaten by her husband, oh, I get it, he's a great lover. Oh, I get it, he's a wonderful provider. Oh, I get it, he's a great soccer coach and you all have a great reputation in the community. Because when you do that, you reinforce the trauma bond to the oppressor. And so believe it or not, that is what a lot of us do. We've stepped outside the faith. We've left it behind. But in this moment where I feel it is so critical to analyze the way the faith is used to oppress our people, we inadvertently actually romanticize it because we feel it's essential to do so to maintain and preserve our heritage, our identity, and our culture. And while those are definitely understandable, and I would say even, good motivations to do things, if we're doing it in a vacuum, the reality is we're not doing it in a vacuum. We're doing it at a time where our efforts and our energy are very, very critical because of everything that's happening around us. That's why I made the point of, yes, you build the Holocaust Museum. Yes, you build the World War I museum or whatever, but you don't do it in the middle of it. You do it after. And I get that means you want to collect things in the moment so that you preserve the authentic history. I think that was actually a fantastic point, right? But then the question has to become how much of it needs to be collected? Why does it need to be collected? When does it need to be collected? And who should be collecting it, right? And I would just say we kind of got enough right now that we don't really need to worry about whether or not we're going to lose the artifacts. But I get it. The problem with it, again, becomes like an education or awareness thing. How much energy and resources are we going to recruit into doing that? Because, again, the concern is not that we'll document the artifacts. The concern is that our efforts will focus on documenting the artifacts or basically making people feel like, oh, okay, well, I'm preserving the church and I'm documenting the history and I'm taking pictures and I'm recording video of everything that's happening. Again, now I can go home and go to sleep feeling like I really was doing something, because again, the trick is to make sure that documentarian effort or zeal doesn't become a substitute for meaningful resistance.
That's well put. I think that's well put.
I appreciate that.
obviously, my resistance comes from educating myself about what the Bible says, what it states. It's not having not been exposed to it and therefore believing something other than that. When I believed there was a God, I looked at a lot of different religions because I find people believing in religions fascinating. That search for that spiritual connection. It's fascinating to me, and it has been since I was a small child. Um, I thought I was right because I was a Christian now, but I didn't want to poo-poo on other people's parades until I was told I should. Until I was told as an adult, yeah, you need to actively get out there and convert people. Go get your Jewish friends saved. Faithful viewers for our show, well, loyal viewers to our show, I think faithful might not be the best word to use, may remember me recounting a story where I had a dear friend who's Jewish, and I was trying to get her to convert, and she said, do you think I'll go to hell if I don't convert? And I was stunned that I couldn't reflexively say yes. In that moment, my friend Amanda got me to realize it's not a very good God that would send someone who is as wonderful to her. I think she's wonderful. She wasn't promoting herself.
Sure. Yeah.
Because she didn't believe that Jesus was the Son of God.
Right.
In fact, I had to tell her, Amanda, I could never do that, but the Bible says that that's the case.
Yeah.
And when I was faced with, wait, that doesn't make sense. Not that it doesn't make sense that God was willing to do something I could not do or would not do. But this was something God simply shouldn't do. Not to someone like her. And if God has failed to see her value, regardless of her beliefs, how many more people like her are there? Perhaps a former boss of mine, she said, I'm very good at getting people to do what they're not supposed to do. Okay, well, maybe I could petition God, hey, there's got to be millions of people like Amanda. Can we just, we got the space. I know we have the space. Can we fit them in? Or will you fit them in? I know you can. Will you? I didn't know if I'd be able to strike that bargain with God someday. But for people like her, they shouldn't need a bargain. It should simply be that way. Scripture doesn't say that just because someone's quote unquote good, right? There are lots of conflicts within the pages of the Bible. And I think if you are a moral person and you're confronted with the same or similar situation, and you have to decide, is God moral for sending good people to hell? If your answer is anything but no, immediately open your Bible and turn to Ezekiel 20 and read the whole thing. If you can still walk away from a Christian, you had no understanding of what you read in Ezekiel 20.
See, I think they do. I really do. You have to remember, like, I really do believe this true. I truly think most Christians at some level have wrestled with something most of us would find morally, just a deal breaker. And it just isn't a deal breaker for them. They just, for them, they're so bought into it at this point. It's like the ones who tell you, if somebody proved to me it wasn't true, I would hope that I would find a way to believe it anyway. And I think that's how most of them really feel. I've said that to my students. I think that's how most of them really feel. But when a person says that to you, I just think we're done, because they basically told you they don't care if it's true or not. I think it's the same thing. When Christians say God works in mysterious ways, it is their way of acknowledging that if they were it doesn't make sense to them, right? If they were in control, this is not what all powerful, all knowing, and all loving would look like if they were God. But you know, so I mean, I do feel you, and I would hope that would be like a real moment for people, because I think a lot of people will deconstruct and can deconstruct, but I think that would be one of those like make or break moments, because for a lot of people who do deconstruct, they would respond to that like, ooh, like I gotta really sit with this. But unfortunately, I feel like a lot of them, you know, they just move on to the next thing, because again, they've already accepted a story where God drowned everything on the planet. They've
And
already
they're
accepted
still okay with it.
yeah, they've
They're
accepted all the
still okay with it.
genocide stories and the fact that Jesus was
Now,
sacrificed even though he didn't do anything wrong. Like, oh, you know what I mean? So they've already kind of swallowed a lot. Yeah.
the thing we need to remember is this. One of the ways that Christianity stays in business is ignorance. The adherents, on average, don't read the material. They don't study for the test.
Yeah.
They don't. They don't study for the test. If they understood that the Noah's Ark story was taken from one, if not two other older myths, instead of saying, well, no, those myths prove that the story is true because it happened. And when the Jews wrote it down, they just wrote it down with the facts. They got the story right. Like, oh, really? You think so? You think so? There was a Noah's Ark movie out a few years ago with Russell Crowe in it. I think it was Darren Aronofsky that was the director. He did something brilliant. He and the writer, whoever the writer was, the story has Noah talking about the beginning of creation. Because the question in my mind had long been, who preserved this? I don't see Noah giving an account of Adam and Eve. I don't see Noah giving an account of the universe being created. But a writer comes along millennia later and fixes it for us. Well, it must have been Noah or one of his children, right? But in the story, it's Noah preserving that story. How about, isn't that amazing? Isn't that lucky that we have? The crazy thing about all of this, and I don't know how it's going to shake out and get resolved, but the crazy thing about all of this is that power is held on and maintained because of ignorance. And I'll say that ignorance comes riding on the back of a willingness to shut one's eyes and wish certain parts of what they know they have seen simply are not true. I'm going to bring this back to Donald Trump. It is astonishing to me why more Republicans in power don't say, you know what you just said is enough. If every one of our political representatives turned their backs on Donald Trump today and impeached him, you know what they do a month from now? Their job.
Yeah.
They would be able to do their job. But someone who isn't in power comes up with a plan that a lot of these people who came to power without a plan, they're willing to do that because it sounds good, right? Somebody's willing to attack Iraq or Syria because of something that happened in the Bible thousands of years ago, or that the Bible states happened thousands of years ago. Yeah, we need to get back at them for that. No, you don't. No, you don't. That's the past. Why are you hurting modern people over it?
But that's our case, right? Our case is that we have to look at the role our society plays in this. We have allowed this to happen. We have given this cult so much privilege that this is the reality that is created. And in this moment, people still, not you personally, but people still are unwilling to tell them that it's not true. That's part of, and that's really, that's the issue. That's the issue I take with this whole let's preserve it thing. Is, look, if you, the most important thing to do right now is to tell them it's not true. Are you going to tell them it's not true? Well, no, we're not going to tell them it's not true, because if we tell them it's not true, then they're not going to support it. Oh, well, they're only going to support it if it's faith. Like, that's the reality. The reality is, I should have used that phrase, faith preserving. But that's the reality of a project like that. A project like that only has legs if it's faith preserving. What do I mean faith preserving? That it doesn't say, imply, or do anything that would actually be considered a threat to the practice of faith. And you could even tell by the way that they were talking about it that they would be good with that. They would be fine with it being faith preserving, because it's the way to honor the culture or to preserve it or whatever. So again, that's part of my analysis, is that look how this actually works. Even for people who have deconstructed, they have this romanticization that happens as I just want to reserve my culture and my identity. And then in order to do that, for that to have a legitimate shot at working, they have to basically agree or concede to a faith preserving narrative. So you've gone from cultural preservation into faith preservation. And again, that's very dangerous right now, especially because we need to be getting Black people to leave the Black church.
Well, pocket locker, then I think you have some work ahead of you in how do you get people to differentiate the two? For me, I simply say it. I go back to what my teacher said, what my professor said. Behavior is an artifact. This is what people did, right? Me talking to those Civil War reenactors. This is what people did. Someone explaining to me how a cannon works. The cannon was invented before the United States even came into being as a nation, right?
But here's
Before
another
that,
question.
Nationhood happened. But here's some guy explaining it to me in, back in 2015 or something like that, whenever it was that I was there.
My question would be, what else did they do? Because see, that's the other thing. When you teach culture, you teach all the different elements, the subsistence, how do they feed themselves, their political economy, how are their groups and how is their society structured? How were their family units structured? What was their behavior inside the house? So the point being, again, this obsession with the faith really does reduce the culture in a way to suggest that the faith is so central to the culture that it deserves a sort of primacy in being preserved. Whereas again, I would say that that's another part of the problem, because look, every society and every human culture has had its cults, and lots of them have died, and the people are fine. So I don't even agree with the argument that necessarily cultures or faiths necessarily do need to be preserved. I think that that's a preference. It very much marks a preference. It says, like, I would like certain aspects of our past to be preserved, and these are my preferred aspects. Like, for me, my preferred aspect would be games. For instance, like, I'm very serious about like trying to preserve and pass on Pinochle, because I'm concerned that the same thing she said, when I go to a house party to play Pinochle, most of the people are 50 plus, and it's because it's not being taught to the younger generation. But again, Pinochle doesn't require believing in an untrue cult that is currently being used to oppress Black people. It actually just literally means trying to preserve a variant of a game that has been like practiced in our culture and passed down from generation to generation. And we have very legitimate reasons to want to continue that. Mainly, it's a fun game, and we would love future generations to know how to play it. That's it. But so what makes preserving the songs of the Black church more important than the games that the Black slaves played? That's the anthropology of anthropology. Well, when you ask that question, you see what I'm saying? Though, like,
sure. And this is what's great about human beings having a variety of interests. Uh, there's going to be someone very interested in the games, and there's going to be someone very interested in the music,
Right.
someone
Yeah.
very interested in the stories, someone very, very interested in the people who were recaptured and what they went through. Um, I think a huge part of this discussion has to be the acknowledgement of the control that people can have over millions of people by insisting and pushing the narrative that the God is real. Mike Johnson is a great example. I thought there's no way this guy knows jack crap about the Bible. Someone confronted him on the question of like in Matthew 25, how you have to look out for the stranger in your land. He went right at it full steam, like, yup, I know that verse, and talked about it. And he says, well, the Bible also talks about borders. So he gave a really good response in the beginning, and then he proceeded to bullshit people on why he wasn't actively following what Jesus said.
I don't think he was
Right?
bullshitting people though.
No, he was
Or maybe
bullshitting
he was.
people
Maybe he
because
was. Because Mike Johnson's always bullshitting.
Yeah, he wanted to, in his next breath, justify what he had been doing and using the Bible to do it. Politicians routinely do this. They hold themselves up to be Johnny Great Christian and all this stuff. And you look at their life, you go, there's no effing way. And they'll say, well, God used an imperfect people like David. David was a man after God's own heart. David raped
absolutely.
people. He was a
100%,
wife stealer. I could go on and on about.
I hate to say it, they're right. They're right. They're so right.
But that's the justification. They're always rolling that out to justify their own cruelty
and again,
their own behavior, and justify themselves doing bad things.
But you're almost making my case for me, because here's the thing we do. Here's another thing we do. It's sort of a different issue, but they're related.
Well, that's why it's preserved. That's why I'm saying that's why it's preserved in the culture, not as an artifact pocket locker. That's why it stays active, because you've heard me say this from the beginning of Hot Program. Religion is useful. Yeah,
but be so for real. Their museum does not get funded if it includes that narrative. If it says we need to talk about how this religion has been used to control people, that's the end of that project right there. It will not get grants. It will not get land. It will not get tax approval, because
there's someone saying, "Shut up, shut up."
Yeah, like they're not. You can't go there. But also, you're kind of making my case for me, because here's what happens. And this is another aspect of it. That's what I usually refer to as the liberal whitewashing of Christianity. And that's kind of how I see it, although Black people do it too. It's this idea of, I'm going to construct the true Christianity. Especially, I see a lot of people who have left very hard right leaning, like Christian nationalist type congregations. What they love to do is they left a very extreme version of the cult that they don't identify with anymore. And so now what they do is they construct the Christianity that they wish they were raised in. And so they construct a Christianity that's based on love thy neighbor and the best parts of Jesus. But what they're doing is they're just counter cherry picking. And this is why I don't get into the Bible wars with people trying to say, oh, well, Jesus wants you to love your neighbor. Yeah, but you're just cherry picking counter passages. So they have every right. Mike Johnson, I recognize. I think Mike Johnson's a fucking asshole, but I recognize that when Mike Johnson goes to, I want to use this example to, legitimize, my worship of an imperfect person. I want to use this over here to legitimize my exclusion of immigrants. I want to use this over here to pretend God is anti-abortion, or I want to use this over here to pretend God supports the death penalty. They're not doing anything fundamentally different than the person who says, I want to pick this passage over here when Jesus, feeds the 5,000 people. I want to choose this passage over here where Jesus heals somebody.
Well, they are doing something that it's very different.
Well,
I'll argue it's very different. Sure, because Jesus saying, I'm going to take these scraps of food and I'm going to feed 5,000 people. When Jesus says, I'm going to heal the sick. When Jesus says, look after the stranger in your land, it's not about him. It's about caring for as many people as you possibly can and ending suffering for as many people as you possibly can.
But I would say you just
When,
did it. Like I would say you just did it. You just took your
well, I'm great at
preferred
that sort of thing.
You took your preferred
Right,
interpretation of the Bible
that's his point.
and
That's
tried
the
to make
guy's
it.
point.
But it's not.
But
I wouldn't say it's the God, but see, it fits into a God framework. Like I would say that
that's
God has never. The Bible is not a book. The Bible is not a book about feeding the hungry. There may be a story in the Bible about feeding the hungry
multiple stories
that's
about it
used.
happening, yeah.
But again, you know what else I see that as? And people in America are going to identify with this when I say it. It's the same way the Epstein class did all the philanthropy. And no, I'm not even being facetious, y'all. That is how I see, and that's why I have a problem with the liberal whitewashers. Why do I have a problem with the liberal whitewashers? Because you are taking a cult that you know is harmful, dangerous, oppressive, and not true, and you are basically doing the marketing for it, not realizing that that is always how oppression operates. It's like Uncle Bobby says, if a predator looked like a predator, they would never predate. So what you are doing, instead of telling us, yo, that's a predator, stay away from them, you're going, no, they're not predators. They really just want to love their neighbors. They're kind people. They're loving people. You can trust them. And then when the harm happens, you go, oh, well, they weren't the true Christians. They weren't doing Christianity right. Don't worry. They're not monsters. Go to the other church over there. I promise. And then when the harm happens over there, no, well, they weren't doing Christianity right. And it's like, listen, I get it. And I get that people are marks. Let's be real. There's marks and there's con men. Okay, so there's the con men, the faith healers that are genuinely like tricking people. They know it's all bullshit. Yeah, that's happening. And then there are the marks. There are the suckers that really they've internalized the court, and they believe Jesus gives them the warm and fuzzies. Oh, he's all about taking care of the unfortunate. So those people are suckers. But I just don't. Yeah, we gotta get out. We're supposed to be out here a little while ago.
Yeah, I gotta wrap it up. Wife and baby are at the door, and wife needs some sleep.
For sure. But yeah, all I'm saying is you got to understand that harmful institutions are always going to operate from a place of esteem and reputation. That if you don't understand the connection between oppression and esteem and reputation, you're missing the mark. No pun intended. So for real, people have to stop doing that, because that is literally, again, and I want to leave y'all with that. That is literally the Epstein class doing philanthropy. When you look at the Epstein people, they were all about protecting women and protecting the children and saving the whales and all of that stuff. And that is how they laundered the reputation so that we would look the other way, so that they would be above suspicion. And so when I see people doing that to the church, I get it. It's very tempting to do it because it makes you feel kind and like you don't have to get into fights and be nasty with people. But you have to understand how that keeps them in power and facilitates future harm. All right, my one black friend, that's my closing thoughts. Give us your closing thoughts and we up out of here.
Pocket Locker's only partially wrong. But I'm entirely correct. Look, you want to say hi, dear? Okay. All right. My daughter is in the room. So I think it's something that's not definitely going to be resolved in the space that we have in this short time. Okay. Normally she can't wait to be in front of a telephone. But we really all have to think about this from the standpoint of, I guess, our own standpoint. The individuals that are talking about preservation, I'm with them. I think we need it would be great if we had a complete and accurate history. It doesn't mean we should repeat it. And I did.
Man,
I was
don't believe
waiting for you to. I was waiting for you to coin the term "Wishtianity." I was waiting for you to say it because you were saying "wish." Like he's gonna say "Wishtianity" any second now.
That's good. We gotta go with that.
All right.
That's a good one. All right, man. Appreciate you.
All
We'll see you next
Appreciate
week.
you too. See you next week.
Hang out, gang. All right, set them gone. We'll see you next time.
See ya.
I forgot how